I'm Carl Friesen, and today we're talking about some Mennonite background. Now, my father comes from that culture, which was sort of on the more radical end of the Protestant Reformation of the 1500s in Europe. And so they were people who lived in Germany. And because they weren't that terribly popular there, because of their religious beliefs, they moved to Russia at the invitation of Catherine the Great, who was German, by the way, and she wanted to bring some Mennonites to Russia to be able to learn how to farm, so they could teach the Russian people how to farm. And so that's what they did. They were given areas to farm, and they lived there for 300 years. And they developed certain cultures and things that they kept from Germany in Russia, including the German language, two German languages actually. And then when the revolution came around, they had to leave. And so some of the Mennonites who were living in Canada invited them to come to Western Canada. And so that's what they did. My father was 10 years old in 1924 when they immigrated from Russia through the Baltics, a bit of a stay in England, and then they came to Quebec City and they took the train over to Saskatchewan. And one of the things they brought with them was their culture and some of the recipes they had, which are heavily German influenced. So one of those recipes that my father used to make, now we were in a very, very traditional kind of a household. So my mother did most of the cooking, while my father and my brothers and I did the farm work on the outside. So we're going back to a time when my father was, he knew how to cook basically one or two things, and one of them was what he called Platz, which is it just means place in German. I don't know why it comes that way, but this is what he wrote out, and this is the Platz recipe that he wrote. Now you can see it's written in a fountain pen, and that's what he preferred, really. And it's written in a very angular style of writing, and that's what he learned in school. This is German handwriting, written in English. So you can see what he's got here is he's got the bottom of the recipe, and then the middle, and then he's got bottom here, but I changed that to top. So what the recipe calls for is 1.5 cups of flour, 1 tap of baking powder, in other words, tap, and 1.5 eggs, and 1 inch of butter. So he takes a pound of butter and he cuts 1 inch off it, and that's 1 inch of butter. And you mix all those together and you spread that on an 11-inch pie pan. I used to do this just with putting the flour on the table and then rolling it out with the rolling pin. But that's it doesn't really work very well with this stuff. It works with regular stuff, but not with this gluten-free flour. Because what gluten is, it helps to bind the whole thing together. So there's less structure to this dough. It's more like corn flour dough, really. So it's that's why I'm using the parchment paper. I finished the crust, and it's probably a little too high, but I've left it high because I can cut back on this. It depends on how much of the filling we're able to fill this up with, and then I'll cut it back to a reasonable height so we don't have a whole lot of crust. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this aside, and now I want to be able to put the fruit together. So what we have here is I'm going to take 2 apples, and I'm going to peel them, and 1 pear, and a couple of plums, which add a sort of a pleasant red color to the dish, and a couple of kiwi fruit. Now, I don't like kiwis. One, they're a pain to peel, but they add a certain amount of tartness or sourness to the dish. And one other thing my father has on this recipe, what he says is, any fruit, I use this, something tart, gooseberries in his case. I don't have gooseberries, so I'm going to use the kiwi fruit, some rhubarb, some quince. Now these are all things that he has that I don't have. Cut up some dried apricots to absorb the juice, and an apple. So this is dried apricots. what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull a few of these out, and I'll just slice them up on the cutting board, and that way that'll absorb some of the juice. And yeah, I've learned the hard way that you don't not put these in, because it always is too liquid. So I'm going to put those aside, and I'm going to start processing the fruit. Now this, what you got here, is an apple core, and it's kind of strange, but this is what you use to core the apple. So you mix that together, and then you put a glaze on it of the other 1.5 of the 3 eggs you used, and then 3/4 of a cup of sugar, and then you bake that. So this was a fairly traditional cultural recipe, and it's kind of special to me because it's one of the few things, as I said, that my father was actually able to cook. And so I picked up some aspects of Mennonite culture, but not really all that many, because my mother wasn't a Mennonite. She was brought into the faith, so to speak, and so she never really learned how to cook Mennonite recipes. So this is one of the few recipes that I've got from the Mennonite side of my culture, on my father's side of the family. So what we would do at Christmas time is we would make desserts like this, and there were other ones as well. Neujahrskuchen, which is New Year's cookies, which is sort of like a deep fried donut kind of thing, studded with raisins. And then there's also Pfeffernüsse, which are small little cookies, and the Pfeffer means pepper. So they had a little bit of spice to them. In this case, it wasn't pepper. I forget what it was. I think it was cinnamon and a few other things like that to add a bit of zip to things. So there are certain other cultural recipes that come with this whole Mennonite thing. And then we'd also have a certain religious aspect of this as well, where we thank God for Jesus coming here and all that kind of thing. But so the traditional Christmas has been wrapped up with what we call English Christmas as well, so there's gift giving and such. That wasn't really too much a part of our culture as Mennonites going back. But that's how we celebrate Christmas today.